Good afternoon, and welcome to this month's Lunch with the Libraries and Museums. It is the ongoing speaker series that spotlights the unique collections, pioneering initiatives, and outstanding staff of the Sheridan Libraries and University Museums. My name is Claire Miller, President of the Friends Advisory Council. The Friends of the Libraries are one of the oldest university library support groups in the United States. Since 1931, we have provided financial support, advocacy, and volunteer assistance to ensure that the libraries remain one of the university's strongest assets, the heart of intellectual life at Hopkins. Our conversation today will focus on an Adopt a Book program, which allows fellow book lovers like me to adopt recent library acquisitions by underwriting their costs. The ever-growing collection of books and ephemera enhances the classroom experience and creates new opportunities for research by students and professors at Hopkins. By sponsoring items, you can directly help our library staff to broaden its collections, preserve treasures for future generations, and make rare materials available around the world through digitalization. Today's showcase will feature some of the interesting, beautiful, and rare items available for adoption. Our presenters are Sean Evans, Don Juedes, Heidi Herr, and Paul Espinosa. Margaret Burri will moderate our Q&A. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the program.
Hi everyone, I'm Sean Evans. I'm a librarian here at Sheridan Libraries, and I collect mostly in the areas of women's studies and queer studies. And I'm here to talk about my Adopt a Book selection, which is the GenderFail archive. GenderFail is a press founded by artist and designer B. Oakley in 2015. And it's an ongoing project. It's a publishing project that publishes primarily queer, trans, and artists of color, and writers as well. So it's a real mix of types of materials. Most of the work falls somewhere between kind of artist books and zines, and they are mostly risograph, although not all of them. It's a mix of things that are written and produced by B, the founder themselves, and also by other queer and trans artists and designers. Also, it's called GenderFail. So the idea is kind of structured around this idea of failure as a creative potential. This is an example of one of the zines that uses a really beautiful typeface and that is pretty emblematic of a lot of the work in this collection. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about this collection is because it's not just a publishing platform, it's kind of an archival intervention. The project really started around this work, which is a photograph from the 1974 New York Christopher Street Gay Parade. And there's a photograph of this is a Riso printing of a photograph of a woman holding a hand-drawn sign that says Mother Nature is a lesbian. And so what B did was take this sign, they were fascinated by it, and actually reached out to and worked with the woman in the photograph to design a typeface that you can see here, which has become kind of iconic of the project itself. They've gone on to design a number of other typefaces, almost always using archival materials. So they've used, for example, the ACT UP archive and the ACT UP Oral History Project. And I have an example here. This is a collaboration with designer Paul Soulelis. What you see is this pretty iconic photograph from the ACT UP protest era. So this is the artist David Wojnarowicz wearing a leather jacket that reads, "If I die of AIDS, forget burial, just drop my body on the steps of the FDA." And then it also has the iconic pink triangle that is associated with ACT UP. And then the page itself says, what is queer typography? So it's kind of thinking about typefaces, what is an open source typeface, what is protest culture, how do we merge these things to design a typeface, which we typically think of as something related to corporate culture and branding, but it's really pulling it out of that and making it about community, about protest culture, and in this case, really about survival. And I think it's a really beautiful project. There's lots of other amazing things in here, lots of individual artist books from artists, but this is some of my favorite stuff, and it's exciting to talk about this at a decade of GenderFail. They were founded in 2015, but kind of started in 2014. And I use this really actively in courses. I decided to collect it because there were a number of courses looking at queer and trans cultural production. So I thought that this would be a great starting place to talk about questions like, what is an archive? What is an archival intervention? What is queering the archive? And so I often use this in both undergraduate and graduate coursework here at Hopkins. So thank you so much. I'm really happy to have been able to share with you today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Don Juedes. I'm the art history librarian, and I've been here for over 20 years, and I've been building a really important teaching collection that I want to talk to you about and show you 3 of our most recent acquisitions for that collection. The collection is completely about fine facsimiles of medieval and early modern manuscripts. So they are not originals. They are beautiful and exquisite reproductions of one-of-a-kind objects. Having this teaching collection gives students access to materials they would never be able to see in real life, much less touch them. Students are used to images. These days, students are they think art is something on their phone. And in the classroom, what this not only does is we have images up on a screen, but we have the objects as well. And there is a tactility and a materiality to these things that really brings art history to life for the students. Well, the first facsimile that I'd like to show you is a facsimile of an Islamic manuscript called the Mirajnama. It's commonly referred to as the Apocalypse of Muhammad. It depicts the time in 621 when he entered on what's called the night journey, which he is taken through the heavens and through earth and through hell, guided by the archangel Gabriel. And he's on the back of a winged creature with a human head. And so the pages are beautiful. It's in not only the pages, but this beautiful, exquisite outside, this ornate, golden, shiny cover. It is exactly like the original. It's not real gold, but it's very good fake gold. And as you turn the pages, the paper is made to feel like the original material. And as you go through this, you will see the story being told, which is when the Archangel Gabriel comes to Muhammad, leads him off through the night into the world, flying through the air, meeting all sorts of interesting people and creatures. And as they're going through the night journey, eventually, as that ends, they ascend up through the heavens, and that's what's called the mirage, the ascension. And eventually come down, and they wind up going through hell. It's widely believed that Dante was inspired by this work when he created the Divine Comedy. So to have this in my classroom, and I can tell you I've seen it with the students, when they're looking at it, they're touching it, they understand the connections between things like the Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy more generally. And they're looking at this, it just brings this whole story of Muhammad to life in such a meaningful and wonderful way. The facsimile I want to show you now is something called the Hittite Codex. It was created in the early 11th century in what's now Germany. It was commissioned by the Abbess Hidde. She was in charge of a convent in a town called Meschede, not too far from current day Cologne. She commissioned this publication of the Gospels, and it is a manuscript, of course, in the early 11th century, hand done, and it was dedicated to the patron saint of the convent, Saint Walburga. There's some very wonderful things that go throughout this codex. The colors they use a beautiful assortment of blues and oranges and gold. It also has beautiful fake gold to capture the importance of these images. And here is the main page that has Christ with the four evangelists around them, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. As you proceed through this, you also find there is a beautiful portrait with St. Jerome. This Bible is in Latin. It's the first Vulgate Bible, and St. Jerome is credited for creating the first Latin Bible. And then we come across what's called the canon tables. And these canon tables are essentially sort of an index that tells you the connections between the different books, between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. And you'll see they're done in this beautiful sort of architectural style. It shows that it's the foundation of the book. It's the building of the book. Absolutely wonderful. And again, the color palette, these blues and oranges, is very, very uncommon. The Abbess Hidde was very, very dedicated to her convent, very dedicated to women, and she commissioned this so that to ensure that women were front and center on all of these stories in the illustrations. And of course, as you would expect, the Virgin Mary is throughout. The very next one, which I love, is the nativity scene after at the manger. And this is such an unusual depiction of Mary. She is lying in front of the manger, protecting her child. And again, the aesthetic of the blues and oranges is so provocative. And here's an image of the Magi coming to visit the baby Jesus when he was a bit of a toddler here. She's protecting him and showing him to the three kings. And then as we proceed, as you would expect, there's lots of images of the Virgin Mary being such a prominent female in the Gospels. But there's also these stories that are in the Gospels that are not typically well known. Here is an image, a beautiful illustration that shows when Christ was healing St. Peter's mother-in-law, who was not well, and he healed her. And in this case, we have, it's a primary illustration. Every time I look at this, I see something new and interesting and something equally beautiful as the page before. And this final page that has Christ on the cross with Saint Mary, his mother, the Virgin Mary, by his side, and also on the other side, Saint John, looking up at him. So this is just another fine example of a manuscript that exists, one of a kind, and having a fine facsimile of this brings it to life in the class. Okay, now I'd like to show you a facsimile of a really, really unusual manuscript called the Voynich manuscript. It is something that was likely made in the early 15th century. It is a remarkable object because it is written in a language that has not yet been deciphered. No one knows what language it is, and no one knows how to read it. This is a perfect facsimile. The pages are remarkable. You can feel, you can probably even hear the parchment vellum-like quality, and you can see they have every tiny detail, the holes that are in it. And what this puzzling manuscript seems to represent by the images is that it starts out as a sort of guidebook to botanicals and herbals, lots of different plants, and documenting what they look like with these beautiful drawings and hand-colored images with text that we can't read throughout, describing what these plants are. But of course, at the time, this is related to medicine because that is predominantly what these things were used for. Food and medicine it sort of shifts over to sort of cosmology, astrology, astronomy, understandings of how the stars interacted and what they mean. And then in this section, it has these enormous and beautiful fold-outs that show all of the different ways they were understanding the stars and the moon and the planets, and showing their relationship to the stories of creation, the stories of how people came about. And then there's a section that gets very, very heavy in text, and it's illustrated with these peculiar illustrations that look almost organic and almost bodily, and there's small women figures sort of throughout. And I do believe that this is the section that they're talking about medicine and pharmaceuticals and sort of medical treatment, and how people benefited from the use of these botanicals and herbals. There are some scholars who believe that this is fake, that it's not a real language, that it's something that was sort of made up. Others think that maybe it was a language that was unique to one very small area, just among a small group of people. As I said, it's just a remarkable illustration to show these students in the classroom that they can touch something and fold out something like this, where it shows these incredible, beautiful illustrations of images of flowers and connecting images of flowers with images of the cosmos. Really remarkable. And to hear them, to hear the students, I love when I teach with this, because they touch it and they're like, they can't believe that images like this are not on their phone, that it's something that it's really represents an object that exists, and it's one object that they will never be able to see. So that's what this facsimile does for them. Gives them access to something that's completely inaccessible otherwise.
Hi, I'm Heidi Herr, and I'm the librarian for English, philosophy, and the writing seminars, as well as the student engagement librarian for special collections. And I'm delighted to share with you a rather eclectic assortment of objects that undergrads in particular find quite compelling, and I hope you find them compelling as well. So first up, we have a trade card for a product called Madame Marie Fontaine's Bosom Beautifier. According to the back of the card, this miracle ointment or lotion or cream, we have no idea what it is, will help cure where the bosoms have become soft and flaccid from whatever cause. It's used to restore them and hardens the bosom, but gives to them the beautiful transparency so much admired. I am very confused by that description, and I'm sure you are as well. While what this product is advertising is certainly memorable, what really takes the cake for me is the use of Oscar Wilde's likeness to legitimize it. Wilde became a huge celebrity in America during his grand tour which occurred in 1882 and 1883, with his likeness used to sell a whole variety of items. This trade card in particular shows how his celebrity intersected with both high and low culture. The bosomed lass on the cover of the card is the character Patience from Gilbert and Sullivan's operetta of the same name. And this operetta was meant to be a parody of the artists and writers of the aesthetic movement. And the bosomed lass is actually styled after Lillian Russell, who was the actress who performed the role of Patience in New York City while Oscar Wilde was in America. And the garish colors utilized just speak to how revolutionary the use of chromolithography was for advertising. There is, of course, so much more one can say about this card, but it is amazing to consider how Wilde's American popularity is enhanced like a bosom treated by Madame Fontaine's Bosom Beautifier through this one card and by studying it. All right, so are you ready for something totally out of this world? Have you ever wondered if there exists a particular game that totally vibes with your sign? Then look no farther. I have just the thing for you. It is called the LSD Ludicrous Systems Development, a psychedelic happening construction kit, created in 1966. A centerpiece of our brand new countercultural ephemera collection, This game kit represents a brief moment in time when LSD usage and party games merged. And this really is more of a kit than a game. It's a psychedelic puzzle with no rules and no solution. There are 20 different game pieces in total that you're meant to kind of stack together in whatever pattern you'd like. Cards included are not identical set to set. So each one is its own unique thing, but rest assured, every box is a groovy delight. Alas, the kit only had its moment in the sun rather briefly. The game, originated in 1966, was discontinued after LSD was officially outlawed in America around 1968. But we can relive those 1960s hippie memories by coming to special collections and playing this very game, or attempting to play this game, in our reading room. The Age of Aquarius still exists at special collections. Is it a book or a stack of tortillas? Why not both? Here is an artist's book by Julia Akhmadeva called Memories of Nixtamel. This artist's book is meant, per the artist, to be my tortilla page memory, past and present, all in a single container, together, randomly. Memories like tortillas, a daily food. My past and my present are together. Born in Russia, Julia emigrated to Mexico in the early 1990s, and much of her work as a result is centered on issues of identity and belonging, of cultural understanding and cultural exchange. And these topics, these themes resonate with students who have seen this book, both in traditional book arts classes and cookery courses as well. They are enchanted by it, to the extent that students, regardless of their background, simply call the book the tortilla book. They can't wait to unwrap the tortilla box to see what's inside, and are never disappointed that they can't eat the pages. So, what do we have inside? A collection of 22 unbound pages, or tortillas, handmade paper, each featuring a different illustration or element that is central to the artist's development and sense of longing in Mexico. So some of these pages are worked up. They're meant, nonetheless, to be very rough, to be very crude, so that when you're handling them, they feel like a tortilla. So you're meant to kind of feel her sense of daily life, her history, through leafing through the various pages or tortillas. And some of these pages showcase her own cultural memory, things that she cherished about her life in Russia, whereas others speak more to her present. But nonetheless, every single page is a thing of beauty, a thing of contemplation, and it is a work that has spawned countless provocative conversations in class among students who are enchanted by it, who at times contest with it, but who nonetheless want to spend more time looking at this tortilla book. And I hope you also find this book to be something beautiful and worthy of consideration. Our storied women's suffrage collection is now the home to a set of charming, funny, and slightly misogynistic women's suffrage-themed porcelain figurines. Produced around 1910 during the deeds, not words era of the United Kingdom's militant Women's Social and Political Union, these porcelain figurines speak to the clamor and the conversation around women and the right to vote in the United Kingdom, and how people wanted to decorate their homes with these objects. It really speaks to how the cause, or the Votes for Women movement as it was known, was really part of daily life and daily conversation. And what I love about these figurines isn't necessarily the message, but how they can be used for teaching and instruction with undergrads, especially in terms of looking at what these figurines say when it comes to analyzing them with our women's suffrage postcards. Here, for instance, we have a statuette of a screaming little girl disrupting the peace of the police officer, and a similar scene in a postcard. Here we have a suffragette cat that is clearly inspired by the famous I Want My Vote postcard. And what's really cool about the suffragette cat is that the cat was originally meant to be a way to mock the suffragettes, but the suffragettes then reclaimed the cat. And the I Want My Vote suffragette cat postcard became something that every suffragette wanted to send to their friends. So the cat, at least, in terms of the figurine, is something that anyone could have bought, and it didn't necessarily signify if someone was pro or anti the movement. But we next have two figurines that are clearly anti-suffrage, and we'll discuss a little bit about why that is the case. First off, you can see that they make use of three colors: purple, white, and green. And these are the colors of the Women's Social and Political Union. So anyone who bought these objects would automatically link them to the conversation surrounding women and the vote. So one of these is a Sheridan, or an older woman, and it says at the base, "A match for any man." And this, of course, sounds inspiring, right? Here we have this older woman who could take on any man and be his equal. But when you think about what this figurine was used for, essentially to hold like very long matchsticks, you realize that it's meant to be a figurine of ridicule, that this woman is going to look ridiculous with matchsticks coming out of her head. Some people view it as a biscuit jar, others as a portal for tobacco. What was it really used for? One may never know. All I know is whenever I see it, I crack up, simply because it says at the base, "Down with the trousers." And you can tell that this was meant to be part of the suffrage conversation because the hat worn by the woman who's going down with the trousers features the colors of green, purple, and white. And this also kind of speaks to a lot of bawdy jokes of the era and phrases like "up with the skirts" and "down with the pants" or "down with the trousers." And we have a lot of postcards, especially postcards that were manufactured in America, such as the one shown here, that really leans into these jokes. And it's because of that sense of kind of that risque nature that some people feel that this object was most likely bought by men and used to store tobacco. But I rather like to think that it belonged to a suffragette with a fun and keen sense of humor who, after a long day of marching in Hyde Park for her rights, came back to her lovely apartment, took down the little object, the cookie jar, from her mantelpiece and had a lovely biscuit from her biscuit container and thought, "I am a suffragette, and that is awesome."
Welcome, everybody. My name is Paul Espinosa. I'm the curator here at the wonderful George Peabody Library. And I've loved the presentations of my colleagues. I'm so glad you could join us for Lunch with the Libraries and this Adopt a Book event. Today I'm going to show you three items, basically, that I have recently purchased that I have already started to use in teaching. So the first object I'm going to show you today is a wonderful set of ephemera that was produced to accompany this wonderful book, Struwwelpeter. I hope some of you have heard of Struwwelpeter, or Slovenly-Peter as he's translated. This is a famous tale, or set of tales, by Heinrich Hoffmann, who produced these stories for his son one Christmas Eve when he went out to find a children's book for his 3-year-old son and couldn't find anything that he liked. And so he came back with a blank notepad and produced these stories. He showed them to his friends and they said, "You've got to publish them." So in 1845, 1,500 copies were printed. Now, those are all snatched up today, of course, by collectors or libraries, but we do have some early editions of Struwwelpeter in this collection. You have Struwwelpeter, or Slovenly-Peter, who doesn't comb his hair and doesn't cut his nails, and he gets in all sorts of trouble and is mocked for his appearance. In other words, these are cautionary tales, tales to guide the child in good behavior. What I purchased and what we're looking for your help in adopting are these wonderful glass slides that were produced in Germany around the 1860s or so. And these show Slovenly-Peter and all his friends and their misadventures. And the way it worked is you would have put this in a viewfinder or what we might call a magic lantern, and looked at these pictures with a light source behind you while your parent or guardian read these to you. So it would have made these tales come vividly to life. And these will be a great addition as an outreach tool to students and to show the afterlife and the continued even merchandising of this wonderful tale. So the next items I want to show you are a set, this children's book here, and this wonderful collage. We all know the story of Robinson Crusoe by Defoe. It was originally published in 1720 about a shipwreck and how resourceful Robinson is to survive, and his man Friday, and the whole story. And so this is a wonderful small format edition, published in London, 1860. And this was really meant for children. But what makes it unique are the wonderful hand-colored illustrations. So there are plenty of copies of this in black and white, but somebody actually took the time to color each of one of these illustrations to make it that much more vivid for a young audience. And there's this wonderful image here where we have Robinson coming back from the hunt with his umbrella and his rifle and his saw and his bag. This is a wonderful example of how children would have encountered the novel. But they also were creative around the novel. And so this wonderful collage, or what we call a dressed print, is actually a unique item. Now, this was produced in the late 1700s, okay? And most likely by a young person who brought together bits of scraps of paper, fur, feathers, you name it, to produce this wonderful collage showing Robinson, again with his umbrella and his rifle and his saw, coming back from the hunt. And so what this shows us is that somebody was looking at the title page, for example, of early Crusoe, but especially that wonderful illustration that we saw in this children's edition. And so this bit of ephemera, this is unique. There's no other one like it. And this, again, allows us to show students and show people just how popular and how creative this novel was within the lives of young children. And now for my final object. This one is, as you can probably tell, is quite old. Now, I just bought this maybe 3 weeks ago, and I'm so excited about it. This is by Jakob Locher, who was crowned Poet Laureate of the German Empire in the early 1500s. And what's neat is that it has a vellum binding of an old manuscript. We call this manuscript waste. And even bits of German in here as well from another book for the end papers. But the book or the pamphlet starts here. And this is all in Latin. And what Locher is trying to do in this pamphlet is make fun of, deconstruct, deflate the philosophers that were known as scholastics in the German universities of the time. And these scholastics had bent and warped and manipulated scripture, for example, through the logic of Aristotle to such a degree that it almost became unrecognizable as the Word of God. And so Locher, in this wonderful little pamphlet, again, all in Latin, is poking fun at these theologians and these scholastics. And that it is full of these wonderful woodcuts showing, again, satirizing these folks. And so here in this one, we have theology riding in a chariot, and she is being pulled not by the scholastics and not by the professors, as was usual, but being pulled by the actual books of the Bible, Genesis and Moses. So again, this is Locher saying we should be looking back to the original text of the Bible in the pursuit of theology. Here's another one showing these theologians threshing wheat. And this was a common metaphor of separating the wheat from the chaff in criticism, right? In biblical criticism and literary criticism, we might say. But again, in these Latin verses, Locher is poking fun of them. They're beating this wheat to death into a pulp. There's nothing left to be read. But my favorite is this illustration at the end. And this is what convinced me to buy this book. So here you have the image of a little dog, and his name is Scaramella, okay? And this was Locher's dog, okay? And he is protecting Locher's book from mice and from these critics and jealous theologians, okay? So this takes a little bit of unpacking, but what's so great is that there is a actual poem here by Scaramella the dog. And this is, again, all in Latin. And I'm using this already with our first year fellows project. My mentee, her name is Story. She's a freshman. And we've already started translating this dialogue from that dog, from Scaramella, who is pronouncing, "I will protect this book from all comers, mice or men." Your adoption of this work will help us in that scholarship. Now you can imagine this has never been translated before, and so this will be a rare opportunity for a Hopkins student to work to improve their Latin, but also look at the historical context of this work. So those are my objects, and I appreciate your attention and your support, and it's through your support that we can actually bring these unique materials, these very rare materials. There is only one other copy of this work in North America, believe it or not. There's one at the Library of Congress, and now there's one at Johns Hopkins. But your support allows us to bring this material to students and to the larger public, and really helps us in our mission of teaching and research at the university.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for that amazing presentation. I'm Margaret Burri, and I'm the Associate Director for Academic Liaison and Special Collections here at the Sheridan Libraries. I can only tell you that I am so excited that I have been joined by my colleagues Sean, Heidi, and Don, and Paul to answer any questions that you may have about this wonderful program. If you haven't already done so, we do encourage everyone who's watching live to put your questions in the Q&A. And if you already have, feel free to ask another. We'll try to our best to answer as many questions as we can. So we have a couple of people who jumped right on early on in the program and asked us some great questions. So without further ado, I will share my first one with the colleagues. So our first question is from Cindy. These books are so cool. Do they ever go on display, maybe when the renovations are all done at the library? I will say yes, that they will, and then I will challenge my colleagues to each name which one of the ones that they showed might they want to put in an exhibit like that. Heidi, do you want to go first?
For me, definitely what we affectionately call the tortilla book. Out of all the things that I have purchased over the past few years, that is one of the items that has simply blown students away. Students, when they see it, they want to handle the item. They want to learn about it. They want to look through each and every little tortilla. And I could just imagine that being part of an amazing display that features book arts and cookbooks focused on food.
How about you, Sean?
Yeah, I think it would be really lovely to display some of the GenderFail collection. It's pretty large. We have 52 items already cataloged, and I think there's close to 80 that are in the process of being cataloged. So it could be its own entire display, but I would actually really love to display it with some of the stuff that my colleagues have been collecting over the past decade or so, which is some of our amazing homophile publications. So we have a lot of pre-Stonewall queer publications, and so something around the history of queer publications I think would be really really amazing.
How about you, Paul?
I would probably vote for the Struwwelpeter glass slides. I'd want to figure out some way to put a light source behind them, so each of the slides, so that you could really see how vivid they are, and they're just so charming, and I think students would really be engaged we would have to have some explainer, because these poor children are getting their thumbs cut off by the tailor, or getting burnt by playing with matches. So it looks pretty gruesome, but it would be interesting to see students interact with that.
And Don, what about you?
Yeah, I can definitely envision this. A lot of the exhibits that I've sort of curated in the past are based on come out of courses that are taught. And since this the facsimile collection I'm talking about is a heavily used teaching collection, I can envision actually all three of those objects that I showed on display, and give it. What's wonderful about these kinds of class-based exhibits is that the students can analyze the items, look at the Voynich manuscript, for example, and identify the portion they think is most interesting and showcase that. So that's my thinking about where we might go.
That's great. Thank you. You've given us some great ideas for the future. We also have a question from Kate. Are there other ways of supporting the library and program if we can't adopt a book? Absolutely. There are a couple of ways you can do that. If you go to library.jhu.edu and click on Give, it actually goes to a page that does talk about our Friends of the Libraries and events that are coming up. And also, what you'll notice if you look at the books that are up there right now for adoption, the prices go anywhere from $25 and go up from there. So while I know we don't always have a lot of financial capacity and there are a lot of pressures at the holidays, we really did try to have something for everyone that could help support our collections. But honestly, Kate, you did the best thing today by coming in and joining us so that you can learn more about the libraries, and we really appreciate that type of support as well. The next question is from John, and it's for Don. He's very fascinated by the Voynich manuscript and would like to know, has any progress been made in deciphering the mysterious script or language?
It's a short answer, no. It has not been. It's still being analyzed by linguists and people who are studying materials from this era. It's a big mystery, and there's, like I said, I think I mentioned, there's debate about the source of it, whether it was somehow manufactured or just someone's thinking. More likely, it was a language that was very sort of regional in a very small area, or maybe some sort of code among certain groups of people who are analyzing these things. All of these debates are continuing to go on. So it has not been deciphered. And so it's stunning and baffling and exciting.
That's great. Thank you. Heidi, a question for you. How big, it's from Joanne, how big is the cookie jar?
Well, it's only 5 inches tall, but as you could tell, it makes quite a presence. It is the thing for any mantelpiece in Edwardian England.
Our next question from Jane is for all of you, and she would like to know, how does it feel to be teaching with these materials? It must inspire you. Siân, do you want to kick us off with that?
Sure, yeah. I've taught with the GenderFail collection a number of times in a variety of different coursework, some in the program for the study of women, gender, and sexuality, but also in a university writing program class where they were looking at publication design and thinking about how to use archival imagery, how to how to make your own publications in sort of a DIY way. And they were actually going to be doing risograph printing too. So it's really wonderful to get to teach with these materials. I love being able to look at something that's so contemporary, right? All of the materials in the GenderFail collection are from 2015 onwards, but they engage with archival materials. So it creates a really great way to talk to students about, even if you don't become a historian and spend your lifetime studying these works, it can be part of your creative production. It can be, lots of other, there are lots of other ways to engage with and use archival materials. So yeah, I found it really, really wonderful, and the students engage with it and get, really into it. So it's a lot of fun.
Heidi?
So it's probably the best part of the job. And in fact, in about 15 minutes, I'm teaching a mini course called Votes and Petticoats. And during today's session, we're actually going to be looking at the cookie jar and the cat and all those other suffragette figurines. And the students, they saw a photograph of one of the items and they are so excited. So I can't wait to get them to explore these items and look at them in conjunction with the postcards and hear about all the conversations and the discoveries that they make. And really hearing their just excitement and their enthusiasm for these artifacts of the past and seeing how they can relate to things that are happening today, it's incredible. And it inspires me to build more of these collections. And I just have to say, I just love it. I love students just smiling and laughing, or sometimes just being like, oh my gosh, whenever they see this stuff.
That's great. Don, what would you like to share?
Yes, this is very exciting to teach with these materials, and I teach mostly in conjunction with faculty in my departments who are true experts on the subjects. I'm not a medievalist. I'm not an early modern historian or art historian. So when I'm working with them, showing these materials to the students, first of all, the students their eyes light up. They can't stop touching it. But also, I learn from the faculty about the topic, the subjects, in much greater detail than I would otherwise. And that actually helps me do my job better when I'm buying regular books for the circulating collection and when I know what kinds of things we need to focus on. So it's this partnership with faculty that I find incredibly helpful, that it's just sort of, this makes it all the more vibrant, I think.
That's great. How about you, Paul?
Yeah, in many ways, along the lines of what others have said. And for me, of course, teaching with faculty is always a learning experience, like Don said. But I often find myself encountering the public coming into the public library here at Peabody. And so what I've really found is that if I can get a laugh at the beginning, I don't have to introduce them to something so scholarly or academic. But if I can elicit a smile around that Robinson Crusoe collage or Struwwelpeter or the dog that's guarding his master's book, I can engage the student or the public, and then from there, then I can drop in a bit of academic jargon or something like that, or historical context to really let the person walk away feeling like they've not only seen something old and unique, but also learned something. And I think I always say, if you're leaving the library and you want to go home and read, then we've all done our jobs.
That's great. Thank you so much. We also have a really nice comment from Marcy, which I want to share, that she's very glad that we're updating and expanding the list of books to be adopted. Every year there's something in every price range. Each year my sister gives me a book for Christmas, but I told her this year to adopt one instead. Thank you, Marcy, and thank your sister. And she's found it very interesting to hear this presentation. And Marcy, to sweeten your sister's interest in this a little more, we've added a new twist to our adoption pages. When she does adopt a book, there will be a lovely printable certificate that will come with it that she can fill out with the name of the book, that your name and the name of the book she adopted. And she can tuck it into your Christmas stocking or into a card that she's sending you. So we're hoping that might be a nice way to encourage people to adopt some books. That's the last question that we had come in, and we are getting very close to time. So I really would like to first thank Heidi, Paul, Don, and Sean for all their work contributing to the Adopt a Book program, and for their generosity of taking time to film this over the last few weeks. Some of you may remember we used to do this in person. I think it's more meaningful to have a wider variety and different curators for you all to meet by doing it virtually. So we'll continue to do this once a year. I'd also like to thank all of you who tuned in for today's conversation. We would like to encourage you to take a moment online to take a look at the collection and think about supporting the Sheridan Library's acquisition of rare materials. As I mentioned before, we have the gift certificate you can send along with the adoption. So they have official adoption papers with the book. And then if you'd like to share or rewatch the program, it will be made available on the Hopkins at Home website and the JHU YouTube channel in the upcoming days. So we hope you have a wonderful weekend, when we look forward to seeing you at the next Lunch with the Libraries and Museums in the new year. So thank you all.